Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's Lebanon Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. We will call ourselves to order and note that all members are present, so we are fully accounted for. The first item that I have up is the approval of minutes. I believe everybody received a copy of those, and I would entertain any motions.
Make motion to approve minutes as written.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? And a second. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. I see no old business before us, so we'll move directly on to our new business. First item up is going to be docket 26-29. This is Subaru of America requesting development standard variance to construct a fence in the front setback. And Ben, I believe you have some background for us.
Absolutely. Good evening, board members. As Mr. Coots mentioned, this is an application by Subaru of America at their property located at 945 Monument Drive in Lebanon. The property is zoned light industrial and is within the thoroughfare overlay district associated with Interstate 65. As you can see here, it's an existing distribution building, about 1 million square feet. They do have truck and trailer parking on the north and south sides of the building, with employee parking on this east side, which here is Monument Drive to use here. So this parking lot is located within the front yard. So this site does have a 6-foot tall chain link fence that provides security for the truck and trailer court areas, and it essentially stops when you get about right here to the edge of the building. And the applicant has been looking at off and on for a little while about providing some additional security for the employee parking area that's out in front of the building. As I mentioned, this is located in the front yard, and our ordinance for fences in the front yard are restricted to 4 feet in height. So in order to get the 6 feet in height that they need to provide this necessary security to that area, they do need a variance, and thus the request that's before you here tonight in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Just again, looking at the side, as I mentioned, this is Monument Drive, and this is the front yard associated. You can let me zoom in actually a little bit. You can see a little bit better. So this is the employee parking area, and actually this aerial photography is a little bit old because the parking area extends up into this area. So what they're really looking at is extending from the fence that stops right here. Across this drive, there'll be an automated gate and extends up between the parking lot and the detention facility up to about here. Then it comes across this way. There'll be a secondary gate that provides access back to this drive out here at the north end of the site. The fence is still probably a little over 100 feet away from Monument Drive. So again, even though it's in the front yard, it is still a fairly significant distance away from the road, and doesn't provide any sort of visibility issues or anything like that. You won't be able to see the site plan on here very well, and I really wanted to pull it up more so just to show you the fence detail. So again, I'll zoom in here on that, and that's just, whoops. That's what you see here. So they are going to be doing an aluminum picket style fence that you see here at 6 feet tall, and still is open, like 50% open, like is required in the front yard area. So really the variance requested is before you not to be able to increase the height to 6 feet from 4 feet to provide the security necessary for that area. Otherwise, the materials, openness, everything meets the front yard fence requirements of the ordinance. And so we're just looking at the fence height. Non-residential fence and wall standards are found in UDO section 53C2, and that's the variance request is from that section. There are 3 findings of fact that need to be addressed when considering a variance. The first is that the approval will not be injurious to public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Staff has determined that the request for the fence variance poses no imminent threat to the public health. Proposed fences over 100 feet from the edge of pavement on Monument Drive will not cause any visibility issues entering or exiting the site. Second, the use and value of the area adjacent will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Staff has determined the requested fence variance will not substantially affect the use and value of the adjacent area. The ornamental metal fence will have no impact on the use of adjacent properties and will provide an aesthetic that is complementary to other uses in the area. And finally, the pages are sticking together. The strict applications of the terms of the UDO will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property. And again, staff has determined a strict application will result in practical difficulties. While the fence is defined in the UDO as being located within the front yard of the existing building, it is still well over 100 feet from Monument Drive. In addition, the increased height to 6 feet is necessary to provide adequate security for employees and their vehicles while on site. So given that, then staff has recommended approval of the development standards variance request to permit relief from the non-residential fence and wall standards of the Unified Development Ordinance. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Get much better quality fence than something like this.
Yeah, it's definitely when they first approached it, we wanted to make sure it was going to be something that met our materials requirements, and they've certainly addressed that.
Just a observation, the drawing you have here indicates a 47-inch fence height.
It's mislabeled.
Okay.
Yeah. I noticed that too.
Okay, good. Any other questions for Ben? Perfect. So this item is, excuse me, this item is a public hearing items. Oh, do we have anyone from the applicant that would care to speak?
I'm Evan West. I'm the site civil engineer. I think Ben did a pretty good job of summarizing it, but if there are any additional questions, I'm more than happy to answer those.
Any questions for Evan? Perfect. Thank you, sir. Now we'll go to the public hearing portion. So I will officially open the public hearing on docket 26-29. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes and keep them relevant to the topic at hand. Feel free to step to the microphone. Seeing no movement towards the microphone, I will close the public hearing. So the public hearing on docket 26-29 is officially opened and closed. And with that, I would, unless there's any final discussion, entertain any motions.
I'll make a motion to approve docket 26-29 as written.
Got a motion to approve and a second from Bruce. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry unanimously. All right, so that takes us on to our second item, which is going to be docket 26-30. And this is Mortensen requesting a variance of use. And Ben, do you have your information up on that one?
Just a moment. All right, so this second one is a unique one due to the circumstances related to ownership on the property. So as Mr. Coutts mentioned, this is a variance of use request. This is a property owned by the IEDC. It's just short of 80 acres. It is in the city and zone and within the LEAP district. And as you can see here, the site under consideration is highlighted in yellow here. The existing limits of the Meta construction site are highlighted in red here. So this is directly adjacent and contiguous with the Meta site. There is not a road that runs between the two, so it is a common property boundary. If this laydown yard were within the construction area of the Meta construction site, it would be permitted by right as part of a temporary use during construction. But this is an adjacent site under separate ownership and is not technically part of the construction site. Our ordinance doesn't really have provisions for off-site temporary laydown yards such as this. And so that's the reason we asked them to go ahead and request the variance of use so it can be discussed in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals. So again, if that red boundary extended around this property and it was owned by Orla LLC, like the rest of this property was included as part of the construction of the site, there's other temporary laydown yards within the construction site. It would just be an improvement location permit, meet all of our standards and move forward. But this is technically off-site, and like I said, the ordinance doesn't really provide for off-site. So while it is adjacent, we treat this like any other off-site. It could have been 2 miles from the site. So we really have to treat them all the same, even though this is adjacent. So this is why it comes for you as a variance of use to allow a temporary storage and laydown yard on this property. So again, as I mentioned, it's directly adjacent to Meta's construction site. They will provide access between the two sites, so it's not going to create any additional traffic onto 200 North. It'll just be access through the existing construction site. A couple things. Well, let's go ahead and show you. And I know that this is difficult to see, so I'll zoom in a little bit. This kind of gives you an overall look at the site. There is a home directly adjacent right here to the northwest and others. I guess I should have pointed that out while we're there. You can see there is residential all the way around, kind of from the north to the southwest area of the site. So again, as we're looking at how we can reduce the impacts, visual and otherwise, on adjoining neighbors, that's really the areas that we're looking at trying to address that. And so this is a proposed site plan. This will have to go through all of our site plan review. It will have to meet all drainage standards. They are going to pave the entire area being used for storage, so there should not be as much issue with dust. They are going to provide detention on site, as you kind of see represented by this light blue on both the east and southwest parts of the property. And then they are going to provide a mound that runs along this western property and around through to the north. Scale's a little hard to see here, so I'll zoom in a little bit. This distance on this green western buffer is 150 feet, and there would be an 8-foot tall mound within that 800 or 150 feet. You use a typical 3-to-1 slope. You need about 50 feet in width to get to an 8-foot tall mound. So they do have plenty of space to do that. And as I talked with one of the adjoining neighbors, we talked about trying to get some additional height in this area if at all possible. So there is certainly room to go taller with the mound if there's the dirt to do it. On the north end, let me scroll up so you can see that. It does become a little bit smaller in this area. It is still 75 feet, which is still plenty of room for an 8-foot tall mound. Again, I did talk to that neighbor, and I'll read their comments that they sent into the record here in a second. They had requested and had concerns about it being reduced to 75 feet, and had asked if this 150 feet could be extended all the way around to this northeast corner of the property. So definitely something that we'll discuss when we get into discussion time with the BZA. This will have lighting. It will not be, it's not a active construction area, so we'll not have the high mast flood lighting like we're seeing and having issues with on the primary construction site. This will be more just for security primarily, so there'll be more of a permanent style light that's a lot easier to direct downward and keep there being the glares that are causing issues in this area. They certainly do have to meet all of our lighting standards associated with that, so that will be part of our review when they finish those plans and make sure that it's not going to cause any adverse conditions on the neighbors. So that's, again, you can kind of see they're showing where, so there's going to be some storm drainage. So yeah, they're going to go through all of our typical drainage review to make sure everything works here, just like if this is a permanent. This is temporary. It will be there during construction. At the end of construction, they will rip everything out and return it back to pre-improvement conditions. So that is part of their commitments. And then kind of walk through some of those commitments. Again, as I mentioned, this is temporary. They'll use for material laydown, storage, and construction parking. It's not public parking. There's no retail or office or any sort of permanent operational use. This is really just a temporary storage area that they'll use during construction. There are no permanent buildings or structures that will be on the site. Any temporary structures like the paving, et cetera, will all be removed once the temporary use goes away and or the construction is completed. They mentioned lighting restrictions. Lighting on the site will be designed to minimize impacts. The stadium style or high mast lighting is not going to be permitted out here. Lighting intensity and placement will be limited to what's necessary to support the temporary use. Again, as I mentioned, it's primarily for security. Future site development and removal, again, all site improvements including the pavement, stormwater management, berms, et cetera, will all be removed at a later date once this is done. And the other thing they mentioned here, obviously they're under construction 24 hours a day. On the main construction of the site, when they are constructing the improvements on this side, they will only do that during daylight hours and will not have activity take place from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. So they will restrict the construction of this site to daylight hours. They will obviously have some activity at nighttime once it's improved, and they're picking up materials to take them to the site, equipment, et cetera. So I just want to make sure that's clear. This is related to the construction, limited to the daytime hours, but there will be some activity out there. Again, as I mentioned, this isn't an active construction site like the main site is, but it will have some activity with some equipment, materials, et cetera. Let the applicant go into further detail, certainly here in a little bit, on how they intend to use the site, what restrictions, et cetera. So that is the real high level here. As I mentioned, I will read into the record the email that we got earlier today. This is from Jim and Hope Sorge that live just on 200 North, just west of the site. Comments from them that came in this morning. We can accept the use variance request from Mortensen. However, would like to see the following changes made to the site plan. For safety, extend the berm to 100. I see he says the berm, I think he means buffer. Extend the berm to 150 feet wide around the residential area and 200 North roadway. And he says also add a 6-foot privacy fence on top of the berm. I'll let the applicant address that. They're certainly willing to, I've already talked to them earlier today, they're willing to extend the distance on that buffer. They may have some different ideas how to get some extra height. That's really going to be disturbed topsoil, so it may not really work very well for putting posts in the ground for a fence, but they may have some other ideas how they might get taller. Again, at 150 feet wide, you can get a taller berm in that area and still meet the slope requirements. So that's one thing that we'll definitely want to discuss. And they just asked that the berm should be seeded and maintained during the term of the use. And those, just make sure those comments are read into the record. So again, going back, I kind of highlighted that already, but that would really be 150 feet is already shown on this west side, and they're just requesting, and the applicant is already aware of this request to make sure that that 150 feet extends all the way around this northwest corner and then across the north property line on 200 North, because there are some homes directly across the street right there. And so we do have, this is a variance of use, so there are 5 findings of fact. The first is that the approval will not be injurious to public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Staff has determined the variance of use to permit an off-site temporary construction staging area and laydown yard on the subject site will not be injurious to public health. While the proposed improvements on the subject site are temporary in nature, they will be completed in a manner that they meet all applicable UDO standards for paving, lighting, screening, et cetera. The use and value of the area adjacent will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Staff determined the requested use variance will not affect the use and value of the area substantially. Because the proposed improvements are temporary in nature, will be removed. Upon completion of construction activity on the site, there will be no long-term impacts on the use and value of adjacent properties. In order to minimize short-term impacts, the applicant is proposing to pave the staging area to reduce dust, install only lighting that meets UDO standards and as necessary for security, construct a screening mount along the north and west property lines where there are existing residential uses. Because there will be no active construction activities taking place on the site, lighting will only be used for security, as I mentioned. Criteria number 3, the need for the variance arises from some condition peculiar to the property. Staff analysis, the subject property is zoned LEAP and allows for permanent improvements associated with advanced manufacturing uses. The site is directly adjacent to the Meta construction site, and the applicant needs additional space for construction staging and material laydown. The proposed improvements are temporary in nature and will be removed once construction is completed. If the subject site was under common ownership of the Meta site and was included in the overall plans for construction, the proposed use would be permitted by right and no specific zoning approvals would be needed. However, because the site is under separate ownership and the site wasn't included in the initial plans for construction, it is considered off-site, and the UDO does not have provisions for off-site temporary construction uses. So that's the unique condition that's taking place here, and that's the reason for the request. Criteria number 4, the strict application of the terms of the UDO will constitute unnecessary hardship. Because the UDO does not have provisions for off-site temporary construction staging, the strict application would create a hardship if applied to the property. Because the applicant is committed to removing the improvements or returning the property pre-construction conditions, there is no long-term impact to the site or surrounding uses. Number 5, the approval does not interfere substantially with the City of Lebanon comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan designates this property for LEAP district advanced manufacturing uses. Because the proposed improvements are temporary in nature and do not impact the ability of the site to become LEAP district uses, the plan does not interfere with the comprehensive plan designation. One thing I did not mention, and it was not included in the analysis staff report, is this is temporary in nature, but there may be want to be some discussion with the applicant about a timing for this. Maybe there's a sunset on this approval based on the anticipated construction timeline so that it doesn't extend much further beyond that. So that may be something, I don't know what that time needs to be. Maybe want the applicant to address that here in a moment. But it may be something the BZA would want to consider as part of the conditions of approval to essentially have a sunset. Let's just say it's 3 years from today's date to give us maybe a little bit more of a hard deadline when this will begin to be returned back to the pre-existing conditions. So this doesn't lag longer than we need it to. So something else I just wanted to bring up that wasn't in the staff analysis or recommendation. So Finally, planning staff recommends approval of the variance of use to permit an off-site temporary construction staging a laydown yard within the LEAP zoning district subject to the following conditions. Number one, that the approval of the variance of use is limited to those uses and temporary improvements proposed by the applicant. The improvements shall be substantially similar to those provided on the conceptual site plan, with the exception of that staff is also adding a recommendation that the buffer be increased to 150 feet on that northwest and north sides, where it's right now shown as 75 feet. So I'd like to add that to this first condition. All temporary improvements shall be removed and the subject property returned to pre-construction conditions once construction on the adjacent meta site has been completed. And number two, that the applicant meets all applicable paving, lighting, and drainage requirements of the UDO. No temporary stadium style or high mast lighting shall be permitted. Construction to install the temporary improvements shall only take place between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. The temporary improvements shall include a screening mount at a minimum of 8 feet in height and hopefully taller if we can get it there along the north and west property lines per the submitted site plan. And with that, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Any questions from the commission? I just had one, I'm going to call it south because I think that's the direction. So the bottom end of your picture here, is there a buffer there or?
There is not. So if they go back to the arrow, you can see there's another 40-acre farm property that's to the south. You do have some homes to the southwest, so there may be some need to maybe just look at curling that around that southwest corner of the site just to make sure there aren't any sort of impacts there to that home. But really, if you look directly south, it's primarily farm fields for the foreseeable distance that you can see here.
It says in here we have drainage, but we're not going to push water to our neighbors, are we?
No, they'll have to look at an accessible off-site drainage location, just like they would if this was a permanent improvement. So they'll collect drainage at the detention that they're going to be providing on the site and then outletting it to an acceptable outlet that would be determined by the city and county when reviewing that drainage plan.
Any other questions for Ben? All right. Do we have the applicant here this evening?
I'm Sam Thayer, Senior Superintendent here for the project.
Darren Copenhaver, Senior Project Manager on the project. And then we have Christine here with Olson. She's on the civil design side of things.
So I think just a couple of things I had taken notes there off of.
Just real quick, just because we're recording, I need you. Yeah, thank you.
Is that a little better?
Yep, that's perfect.
All right. A couple of things I had taken notes there on was, we had heard about the feedback about increasing the borders there on that far northwest corner of that project site, which shouldn't be a problem to be able to accommodate that. There was a new request there about also potentially adding a fence or increasing the height of those berms. I think with the overall width on those, we should be able to accommodate that. Is the 14 feet an acceptable height to be able to go to with berming around there? I think the 8 was originally driven off of local requirements.
Yeah, we'll have Ben.
Okay.
Yeah.
So most definitely, we're more than happy to use all the dirt that we can to be able to build up that mound as high as possible throughout that area. The 3-year timeline is the end goal here. Right now, we're working on a 2-year lease with potential to be able to extend for a third, but would not have to extend any beyond that, right? So if that's one of the considerations for the sunsetting, 100% on board. So those were the couple of big ones that I had taken notes from, but open to any additional questions.
I got one comment that I think I know where it's going to go, but I would suggest that you talk to your safety people and see if it would be possible to make sure that the backup alarms were off between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. I know where that's going to go, but I would like to see you check that out, please.
Yep, we can follow up on that one.
Any other questions from the commission for the applicant?
Are you talking about putting a fence on top of the barrier?
There was a request. On top of that, the concern is that it's just topsoil and it might not be structurally sound to be able to support a wall on top of it. The additional options that we're going to look into, one would be to switch the perimeter fence up to a 14-foot tall exterior perimeter fence. If we can't increase that berm height to that 14 feet, I feel pretty confident we're going to be able to get that berm to 14 just based on the overall layout and the layback that's required. So that's where that question was stemming from.
Questions from the commission? Perfect. Thank you very much. And Ben's probably going to address the,
I do have a question for the applicant too. Can you guys walk through just the day-to-day operations on that site or day and night operation on the site? Just give them a better idea how the site's going to be used, what a typical day is like and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I can see his picture. But the big thing there, all traffic, as Ben had mentioned there, is going to be coming from the project site. Nothing will be coming off of 200 or anywhere else. There'll be, if you can see, nope, can't see that. There's one that's kind of more towards the north and another one that's towards the south, approximately, I don't know, it's 150 feet or so from either end is where the two access points are at. Yep, you can kind of see that one down there for an access, one on the opposite side. So everything will filter into that space from the current Meta project site. Once we made it through the initial construction period, we are going to start with getting the berms. That's all the topsoil that is stripped from that area. So that'll be the first thing that goes in. Should really help with direct line of sight from neighboring properties right now to that project from anywhere on that kind of north side. And then daily operations is really, if you guys have paid much attention to what we have going on over there, the far east side of that site is also primarily used for logistics. And so all of our trucking and that sort of stuff, you'll see, would be coming into that space. It'll get staged, materials be offloaded, and then lined up across that side to be then picked back up and then moved over to the primary project site as we start working our way towards the north. Due to the nature of this project, it's a phased turnover. And so right now we're kind of right in the middle of the overall project site. And as we continue to work our way north, we want to be able to have a space that's, directly adjacent to it to mitigate the amount of cross-project traffic that we will have. And so, it's primarily items that have been prefabricated off-site that are being brought in and then staged in this location. So larger pieces of equipment. We actually make underground structures, storm structures, and those types of things that would be coming in, getting staged before that they're ultimately going to be put in place. And so there's no, we're not, after the initial construction and once that storm system is in, there's no more excavations going on. There's no heavy hauling happening. It's truly just unloading and staging of materials for them to be able to make it back to the project site.
thank you.
I got one more question. Is the equipment, not the equipment, is the product going to be daylight deliveries or is it a 24-hour-a-day delivery system?
Daylight hours
Materials.
on those deliveries, right? I believe the timing on that was from that 7 to 10. We did hear for that for the use of that space for deliveries as well.
Any other questions from the commission? All right. Thank you guys very much. So again, this item is a public hearing item. So a couple of quick points on this. Number one, please make sure you state your name for the record. Also, if you could keep your comments to 3 minutes and pertinent to the application itself, please. So I will officially open the public hearing on docket 26-30. Please feel free to step towards the microphone.
Hi, good evening. My name is Brett Hine. I live at 1495 North, 500 West. It's just about a half a mile from the current site. So members of the board, my name, again, Brett Hine, address 1495 North, 500 West. I'm here tonight regarding the proposed variance for the 78-acre temporary staging yard at 4501 West, 200 North. While I appreciate the planning staff has recommended strict conditions for this specific site, including restricted working hours, a no high mass lighting policy, and the construction of a minimum of 8-foot screening mound, I'm here to ask, why are these common sense protections not already the standard for the existing data center construction site? Currently, the neighbors of the main construction site are living with light pollution, high-intensity stadium-style lighting that bleeds into our homes and onto our properties all night long. Unrestrained noise, construction activity, and machinery noise that continues well past the 10 p.m. threshold proposed for this new yard. Lack of buffering. While the variance requires the minimum of an 8-foot mound to be built up front, the main site remains wide open with no meaningful screening to protect the community's quality of life. The staff report for docket 2630 acknowledges that this variance is necessary because the UDO is silent on off-site staging. However, the community's need for peace, dark skies, and privacy is not silent. If the planning staff recognizes that 10 p.m. curfews and screening mounds are necessary to minimize impacts to nearby neighbors for this 78-acre yard, then this is a clear admission that the current lack of these protections on the main site is a failure of oversight. I asked the board to do two things tonight. One, strictly enforce every condition listed in the staff recommendation for docket 2630 without exception. Two, take action to review the current out of compliance status of the main data center site. This community should not have to wait for a new variance request to get the basic protections that the city clearly knows we deserve. We are not against progress, but we are against being ignored in our own homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment?
My name is Leslie Hine, and I live at 1495 North, 500 West. My question is I want to know who is going to be enforcing these rules for this variance. Currently, it has been left to the homeowners to consistently complain to the city about the noise and the lights. We've been ignored. We've not had emails returned, and it is frustrating. So it's great to have the list, but who's going to make sure it happens? Is it going to fall on us to continue to do this? All we want to do is live in our homes. And this has made it virtually impossible for us to do that. And the only relief we get is when we leave our homes. And so I want to know who's going to be responsible, because we were told, complain to the city. We were told to do that. We did that. I even made an actual official noise complaint on the city's website and never heard anything. My in-laws' fields was flooded. Farm field was flooded, so they're talking about drainage. And I understand that was a mistake, but it happened, and that shouldn't have happened. And so there are things that are happening that they say they're going to not do on this 78 acres, but should have happened already. So I would like to know who's responsible for enforcing these, the variance, the rules.
Thank you for your comments. We'll address any questions after the public hearing. Thank you. Any additional public comment? Seeing no additional public comment, I will officially close the public comment period. So the public comment for docket 26-30 was officially opened and closed. And with that, I will, there was one question posed in there, which is an enforcement question. So Ben, if you can kind of run through what that looks like.
Yeah, so enforcement of any of these conditions would be the planning department staff, my staff. We've had ongoing discussions with neighbors. I'm not saying that every email has been directly responded to, but we've had ongoing discussions with neighbors and with Mortensen out on the site since probably December, related to some of the concerns that have been addressed tonight. There have been modifications made, and we're still working with them. In fact, we're meeting with them probably about once, almost twice a week to just discuss additional changes they're making, additional things that they're trying to see if they can address some of the concerns with the lighting. So there's been ongoing discussion since I think it was December, the first email I sent to Mortensen. So while I understand it is not perfect, it is nowhere close. We are working with them to try to mitigate as many of those issues as we can. The reason that we can apply some additional standards to this is because this is a subjective decision by the, not subjective, but it's a specific decision by the BZA to allow something by variance of use. So you can apply additional conditions that aren't necessarily related to UDO standards. You can apply 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. restrictions that we can't apply elsewhere because it's not addressed in the UDO. The temporary mounds and buffers are, again, they're temporary. So construction sites aren't required to have mounds to provide screening. We're able to do this because this is a variance of use consideration by the BZA, so we can add additional restrictions to this site specifically. So that's why you're able to do those things specific to this site. Whereas on the construction site, we are able to apply the UDO as it is written. So there aren't necessarily buffer requirements for construction sites, temporary buffer yards. We're working with the lighting to address those as much as possible, where we can use the ordinance to be able to do that. So in terms of noise, it's an industrial zone site. They actually don't have a restriction at nighttime construction activity. Their only restriction is to not work within 500 feet of an existing residential property. On a 1,500 acre site, there's lots of parts of that property that are not within 500 feet. So there is not a noise restriction on that site as long as they're not within 500 feet. So we can restrict if they're working within a residential district or near a residential district. But in an industrial zoning area, there are no restrictions on noise or construction activity at night. So again, we're able to enforce what we can in city code and UDO on the construction site. And again, the reason we're able to apply some additional conditions on this is because it's a decision of the BZA to approve a variance of use where you can apply additional conditions to a site that aren't in the UDO.
And then just, this may be good information for everyone, and myself included, but taking this specific project out, let's say I have some sort of a complaint that I'm going to lodge, whether it be through the city website or there's an app, obviously. What is that process, and is there follow-up back in any case?
Yeah, I think it happens any number of ways. It kind of depends on how the initial contact was made. If it comes in through iWork, a lot of times we post updates to iWork on that. So if an individual who posted something would go back to that, to their initial post, there should be updates. I'm not saying that there are there, but there should be in some cases. When we start, I mean, obviously we've had multiple contacts with adjacent neighbors that are about lights and noise. So it's already in process and under discussion. Actually, I know that Sam, the applicant, has been out to some of the residents' homes to look at it with them and try to figure out specific things they can do to address directly with their property, how they might be able to address and mitigate some of those issues. So there are ongoing meetings, discussions about this between the city, between the construction team, and with the neighbors as well to try to mitigate as much as possible.
So even, again, pulling it away from this project specifically, but if I were to make a complaint for, say, a neighbor, if I had that mode through the iWork site, that's where I would expect to see feedback.
Yeah, if you go back there, you'd find that. And if you send an email or contacted, say, our code enforcement staff directly, I would reach back out to them as well.
Okay, perfect. Just some clarity for anyone that may be watching. Any other questions from the commission on this docket?
I have a couple questions. What is like the maximum berm height we could have, or mound height based off the 150 feet?
So at 150 feet, I mean, they're probably going to be limited more by availability of dirt than the width, because at a 3-to-1 slope, I mean, you could go really, really tall within 150 feet, probably 15 feet, no, more than that, 20 tall, theoretically, and get a 3-to-1 slope within 150 feet area. I mean, there's some diminishing returns there, but yeah, you could get pretty tall within that 150 foot, depending on whether the availability of dirt. So I'm sure they're going to go back and do some calculations of how much dirt they need to dig out to get proper detention and figure out what the volume looks like and see how tall they can get it. We'll work with them. I would say I would like to see them get it as tall as possible, but certainly that 14 feet that we talked about with the mound and fence, that would probably be the goal, is to try to get it to at least that. I know they are looking at some other targeted areas to do some other screening walls. It could be as tall as, 32 feet in some cases, or around 30 feet, where they might be able to put up some temporary screening walls in other locations too, to try to address some of the other impacts as well.
And then additionally, what's some of the tallest things, maybe just for the applicant, you guys would store there, just so we have an idea, what kind of threshold we should care about?
Really good question.
Notice they stayed over there.
I would say on average, you're not going to get much on a semi to be able to come to the site that would be much over like 12 foot. Would really be the highest element of something that would come in, just due to over the road restrictions.
If we have something, let's say 15 feet, 99% of the stuff is probably not visible from a neighbor directly across the street. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
Good deal.
I guess the only other practical thing is I assume there's a correlation between berm height and lighting as well. The higher it is, the less that the neighbors will have to deal with.
Correct.
That's my like.
Any additional questions for Ben or the applicant? You got one for Ben?
And in our, the recommendation here, you said that we could put in you said maximum a 3-year lease and then put a time frame of when this would.
Yeah, I would suggest 2 things to add. And one would be to increase the buffer width to 150 feet on that north property line where it's 75 feet now. And then to essentially put a sunset clause in there at 3 years. And it sounds like that's more than acceptable for them. And that would be at 3 years, it's required to start being returned back to pre-existing conditions.
2 questions on that piece. From a sunset clause standpoint, are you thinking they could come back to BZA for additional time if necessary?
Theoretically, they could, yeah.
And then from a berm height perspective, is that just going to be left to the motion, or because we've talked about a couple of different heights? So
I may ask, I know they're civil engineers here. I think more from a design standpoint, if you run into issues, the taller you get, I certainly wouldn't want to say it could go to 14. I know some of the mounds out at Lilyside are 10 to 12-ish feet, so we're within that range of things I know that physically work. I certainly wouldn't want to request a minimum height and then find out that design-wise that doesn't work, so.
The only thing that I wanted to add was, I think if we're talking about it, making adjustments to the berm height to get the biggest, bang for our buck, I think it makes the most sense to, start the work and then talk to our neighbors, right? And see some of those sight lines, and if we need to make adjustments and not just, take a assumption across the entire berm, right? So go make sure that we're making that impact and those height adjustments where it matters, versus just bringing the entire berm up at the same level. Does that make sense?
So would that be in?
Yeah, what I would suggest, just kind of this,
Combo
I would like to see a minimum of a 10 to 12 foot mound, which I think is doable across that entire part. And there may be some targeted locations we can work on with them and with the neighbors where it may need to go a little bit taller than that. But I'd like to see the minimum extended up to 10 to 12 feet on that entire border.
And then obviously work directly with city staff as well as neighbors to address any direct concerns.
10 to 12, and you consider sight lines on adjacent properties, a person 6 feet tall, and they're looking over a 10 to 12-foot mound, what they can actually see over that is actually quite a bit taller on the opposite side. So I think 10 to 12 is a pretty good starting point. There may be some areas where if you're in a second story of a house where it might need to be a little bit taller to increase some of that visual screening.
Are the Hines the closest ones to the berm?
Actually, Brandon Sorge is, he's actually, if you pull this up again, he's this house right here. So the Hind, there's both the parents and Brett and Leslie, they're to the west here, but yeah, the closest house is this one right here. And there are a couple right across the street on 200 North as well.
If berm isn't satisfactory to those people, would they be,
Yeah, I think the issue with committing to that is because it's all disturbed topsoil. It's not structurally sound to drive posts in. So I would.
going to be for 2 years, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you get a good stiff wind out there, may blow the whole thing down too, though. So I think it's better to try to get the mound to 10 to 12 feet initially, and then see if there's some target locations where it might need to be a little bit taller to get some extra screening.
Too out of turn here for you, but I feel pretty good on if we needed to go to 10 foot everywhere and where we're immediately adjacent to the storage property to go to 14, we can make that happen.
And in the board, I would suggest if the board's agreeable, just to add whatever conditions in this mound and then allow Ben to work again with applicants and others, give some discretion to Ben in the planning department.
Any additional questions? Okay. So with that, I would entertain any motions with respect to docket 26-30.
I'll make a motion to approve the variance of use request to permit an off-site temporary construction, staging and lay down yard within the LEAP zoning district. And I'm going to read these and then I may need help with the others. Okay. Subject to the following conditions: that the approval of the variance of use is limited to those uses and temporary improvements proposed by the applicant. The improvements shall be substantially similar to those provided on the conceptual site plan. All temporary improvements shall be removed and the subject property returned to pre-construction conditions once construction on the adjacent meta site has been completed. Condition number 2, that the applicant meets all applicable paving, lighting, and drainage requirements of the UDO. No temporary stadium-style or high-mast lighting shall be permitted. Construction to install the temporary improvement shall only take place between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. The temporary improvement shall include a screening mound. Are we going to correct that?
Yeah, minimum height of 10 feet.
At a minimum height of 10 feet along with north and west property lines per the submitted plan.
So to that, I would then add the height of the berm will be increased to 14 feet in the area around the storage property here. That's the northwest corner. Additionally, this approval will sunset or expire after 3 years. The applicant does have an opportunity to essentially extend, but they would have to come back to the BZA to make that request if it was necessary. And the last thing would be that the buffer width would be increased to 150 feet on both the west and north property lines.
I add one thing. Can we include looping the buffer around that south corner? Just to screen, if necessary, to screen, that at the south corner.
Yeah, I think you want to make that generally, and then we'll work with them to figure out exactly how that needs to be done.
Yeah, please.
Extend a buffer around the southwest corner of the property.
Ben and his team to they're consistent with this.
Yeah. I allow Ben to work with everyone to make all these changes consistent and change where applicable. Is that good?
So we have a very short motion on the table. But as we read that back through the minutes, obviously it'll be very detailed and outlined pretty well. So we do have a motion with those conditions. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And Kelly, we're going to do a roll call vote on this one, please.
Brian Kirschbaum,
Yes.
Bruce Polly, Corey Coots,
Yes.
Ron Edwards, Lori Gross.
Yes.
Thank you very much, everyone, for feedback, working through some of those things and having cordial conversations. So very important. Thank you all very much for that. I see no other items on our agenda. So if no one else has anything for the good of the group, I would entertain a motion on adjournment. Got a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. We will see you at next month's meeting.